Hi everyone, welcome back. Cody here. How's it growing? Well, I know it's been quite a while since I made a video, but I've just been very busy lately. But my garden has grown quite a bit since then, so I figure now is as good a time as any to give you a tour. So how about I show you around? How about we start with our new vegetable plot for this year? Yes, it's grown quite a bit since I just showed you those tiny seedlings just starting to germinate. And I have to say, this has pretty much been a pollinator's paradise. Got lots of bees just everywhere, enjoying the flowers. Yeah, they're certainly loving it. So let's just see what we got here. Over here, along the outside edge, I planted a whole bunch of dill, and it's really taking off. If you look closely, you can see a lot of pollinators around this dill. They really like it. All sorts of parasitic wasps and bees and hoverflies. They all like this a lot. And so I actually have a volunteer sunflower over here. Didn't plant it, just came on its own device, but probably dropped from bird seed, or I don't know how it got there, but it's a very nice one. It's not that tall, but the flower is pretty big, and the bumblebees really like it. There's no bees on it right now. It's evening right now, late July, but anyways, we've been very overrun with beans lately. Planted all these beans over here, and it's just a lot of them. It's a very abundant crop, which I'm thankful for. All kinds of beans. I got these wax yellow beans and then some purple beans over there. Over here, where did I see that? I believe these ones are called dragon's tongue beans. They're kind of speckly, and they're good eating beans. Just had some for dinner tonight, along with some chicken and mashed potatoes, which is really nice. So this plot here is supposed to be tomatoes, and as you can see, they are very small tomatoes. They haven't really grown much at all, but look, as you come up this way, they get bigger and bigger, and over here there's like full-size plants with actually some tomatoes that are starting to grow on them. But the same has happened with these marigolds that I companion planted with them. Over here they're huge, massive marigold plants, probably the biggest I've ever grown, and just as they go this way they get smaller and smaller. They're still going to make flowers, so I'll give hope for the tomatoes. Also planted some peppers here, which are still pretty small as well, but there's a couple bigger peppers over here where these other plants start to get bigger. So I think the reason, here's a pretty big pepper plant. So I think it's actually starting to flower just about. So I think the reason this is happening is because the soil is just so compact and rocky. Tried my best to remove the rocks, but there's just so many thick rocks. So I think over here was just less rocky. So, but that's okay, because still have a lot of other growing space that's good for plants. So over here was really rocky too. But I planted potatoes here, and they're doing awesome. Haven't dug any up yet, but I think it's probably starting to get about time, because these tomatoes are starting to show their age. But yeah, it seems the potatoes are doing pretty well in this rocky clay soil, just because they're have very strong tubers that can penetrate that kind of soil. Some of them are still flowering, so I think I'll wait till they're all done flowering before I harvest any. As you can see, I installed garden pathway lights. They're just the solar LED things along down the center of the path, just to give it a little extra charm. If you cover your hand over the top, you can see that lights up. So when it gets dark, they all light up, and they're multicolored, so they look very pretty there. They just basically change color as they go, kind of thing, as you can see. Over here I probably have the best crop of lettuce I've ever had. We've been eating a lot of it, and a lot of it is really still growing, hasn't gotten bitter yet, and it's still growing very big, so I guess we'll have to harvest it pretty soon. But I think I'll leave some for seed, just because this has been such a good crop. I want to save seeds from this, although it's not bolting yet. And so here's the iceberg lettuce, the head lettuce, and I'm surprised it's like so nicely. Really impressed with this lettuce. These are zinnias. Just planted them along the outside edge, and that might be a reason why the lettuce is doing so well. It's because of the zinnias, which are like a companion plant for them, I believe. And zinnia. In the second row over, these are some spinach that are actually bolting, but I've got some spinach out of it and I've cooked with it, but still fine to eat if it bolts. It's just a little bit more bitter and tough, but once they go to seed, I could save the seeds and grow the same spinach again. More of a cooler season crop, I think. I might see if I could sow a fall crop, maybe that would be cool. These yellow flowers are bok choys, which have long bolted, and so I made some, you know, like, you've ever heard of kale chips? Well, I made bok choy chips instead of just the same recipe, except with bok choy, and that turned out really good. Same with this arugula. So this is arugula, also known as rocket, and it's totally bolting as well. But I had actually cut this all back, really like to the bottom, and it's all grown back and it's flowering again. Bees are back pollinating it, and so I think I'll see if I can let this round go to seed, and that'd be a lot of seed to save for it. There's a wasp over there. So yeah, these wasps have been doing an amazing job at keeping my plants pest free. Good job, wasp. In this section we have broccolis. Now they're not making the flowering heads yet, still in their leafy stage, but they're looking pretty healthy. And I got marigolds and nasturtiums on both sides to deter the cabbage butterflies. It seems to be working because there's barely any damage to these broccolis, which would normally get completely eaten on any given year. And I think the combination of these companion plants, which confuse the butterflies and also the wasps, they actually help keep those butterflies in check. This is a volunteer money plant, and it just kind of grows everywhere. I've had it for several years, and it just self-sows and just grows back all the time, anywhere it finds an opportunity. Same with this borage, it's just a very opportunistic plant, and I just leave it because the bumblebees absolutely love it. Let's see if I can find a bee on the board. Yeah, there's one. See over there, bumblebee. Good job, bee. We appreciate all you do for us. Also got lots of volunteer onions in here because this mulch was originally on the other garden bed, which I'll get to in a bit, but when I was constructing it, I actually moved it over here because my wood chipper died and I needed this spot filled with bark mulch because it was more important over here for the new garden bed. And so when I moved all that mulch, there was lots of dirt that came with it that had onion seeds in it, so I'm getting onions like everywhere in this section over here. And like as much over here. I might have got that from a different area where there was less onions. Hello, bee. So over here we have it's known as the Three Sisters, which are climbing beans, corn, and squash-like plants. So these would be zucchinis, I think. Not getting any zucchinis yet, but they are flowering, which is a good sign. And so basically the way it works is the beans provide nitrogen to the soil, which the corn and the squash use, and the squash's large leaves cover the ground, which helps shade the soil so that corn can grow up nice and tall, and it seems to be working really nicely now. This is a pretty tall one over here. Still relatively early in the season, but I think this part is going to do really awesome. So that's our new vegetable garden in a nutshell. And let's take you to the original one, which is also growing pretty nicely. So over here I have a different variety of corn, and that's actually the eating corn, and this is actually glass gem corn, and it makes very beautiful rainbow colored cobs, kernels, but they aren't really good for eating like you would eat them on a dinner plate. They're more made for grinding into cornmeal, which I've done before, and it makes really nice looking cornbread, that's for sure. What quite possibly might happen is that corn might cross-pollinate with this corn, and then I'll get a weird hybrid, but I like to experiment. I don't mind planting hybrid seeds because it's just more interesting to me to see what those hybrids turn out to be, rather than to try to keep the heirlooms the same every year, which can be tricky anyways, but I just like to see how they turn out. So not a lot of these are from saved seeds actually, because not a lot of our plants actually went to seed other than the volunteer plants that you see. So I didn't save a lot of seeds last year, I just let the volunteers drop. And so we got like volunteer tomatoes, quite a bit of volunteer tomatoes, which is nice. So volunteer tomato in there as well. So these are ground cherries, also known as golden berries, Inca berries, Peruvian ground cherries. I like to call them golden berries actually. And I started these quite a bit earlier, and we'll see if I get ripe berries by the end of the season. Also interplanted in here is some marigolds and calendulas, which is, I guess, a pretty good companion plant. Over here we got collard greens, which are a lot like kale, more heat tolerant. They've been doing really well, and surprisingly there's not a lot of companion plants around them, but the butterflies, cabbage whites, haven't really touched it. I've noticed there's a few holes here and there, but I don't even know if that's from the butterfly larvae. Might just be from other bugs eating at it, but they're actually surprisingly doing pretty well, which is good. Here is kind of a mixture of sparsely planted plants and weeds. I've got quite a few carrots growing around. Way more carrots than last year, which is a good thing. I've also got this flower. It's known as Bee's Friend. And the bumblebees have really flocked to it. All kinds of bees have flocked to it. But they're kind of done now. They're kind of going to seed. So most of the flowers are probably all pollinated, but I saw a bee on one of them. This one's probably going to start flowering pretty soon, so there'll be more bees on that one. These plants are lima beans. More lima beans over there. And some of the weeds I just like to leave because they're just so interesting to me. So this is a mallow, wild common mallow, and they're related to the hibiscus, so be in the same family as marshmallow and hollyhocks, hibiscus, malvas, all that sort of those sort of plants. And they can be medicinally used in a lot of the same ways. But there's actually, they make really little flowers, but there we go. You can see the classic mallow kind of flowers, only they're really little. It's good for pollinators too, and I'll probably end up harvesting this plant. See if I can make tea with it. Apparently it's really good for tea, so. And yeah, just very, it's kind of a mess over here, but it's just the way the seeds decided to germinate. They weren't really very uniform, but that's okay. Pollinators certainly like it, so that's good to see. There's a bee on a branch. Hey bee. Hi. So this is my bean pole, and I planted morning glories on it. So there's a morning glory. There's another morning glory. They're closed now because it's evening. If they were open, they would be evening glories, which they're not. But they open up every morning, and this morning there was a lot on them. They're very pretty. And in this bean pole, I have, you can see here, this would be cucamelon. So I got I think at least a couple cucamelons down there. And so, let's see, I don't think they're making cucamelons yet, but I'm excited to at least try a cucamelon because I don't think I've ever tried one before. Should be awesome. There's some peas in here as well. That one looks like it's ready to harvest. And over here I got strawberries. They're pretty much done for now. Got quite a few strawberries off them, although it did get pretty hot and some of the berries dried out. So on the other side, that one's making berries this late in the season, late July, which is really late, but that one might actually be ready to eat. Almost. I'll give it another few days. I'm surprised with this one. That was a different variety. These other ones I got separately. So over here I planted rhubarb, which I started from seed, and so it's growing in amongst this borage, strawberries. Lots of volunteer borage. I didn't plant any of this borage, it's all volunteers. But there is another kind of mallow. It's Malva zebrina, and it's a more stripy one that's more showy, larger flowers. And this can be used for tea as well, I read. So I'll probably use that a little later. Some more calendulas back here, which is nice. And also my peanut plant is getting bigger, so see, I might get a couple peanuts out of this deal. Interesting kind of plant I've never grown before. Here's the onion section. So these tall ones you see are last year's onions, which are flowering. Except there's a sleeping bee on that onion. Just taking a snooze. It's evening, so we're kind of finished their work for today. Guess it's quitting time for them. All headed back to their hives. They're just sleeping on the job site. And I got new onions down here. And so I planted all these from bulbs. Some of them as volunteers as well, I think. But I've been using them in cooking a lot. Even before they're full-sized. That's okay, because I utilize the stalks as well. Or the scapes. What do you call onion scapes? The garlic scapes? Not sure. But yeah, I use pretty much the whole onion. Just wash it and then chop it up and use the whole thing. Which tastes really good. Here's some leeks. They've gotten a lot bigger since my last video when I planted them. And these are a mixture of Swiss chard and beets. So I believe those ones are beets. These ones are Swiss chard. Pretty much the same plant, only one it's more grown for leaves. Excuse me, and the other one's more grown for the roots. And so I actually planted a stevia plant right here. It's gotten pretty big. Another one. Wow, they actually have grown quite a bit. Surprised. Not huge yet, but they're putting on some size. Over here, this has been a complete success. These are chickpeas, also known as garbanzo beans. And so I think these are pretty much ready to harvest if you want to eat them plain like that. So they make me recognize these from the dried beans you see in the grocery stores. And these are fully chewable, just like regular garden peas. So I actually have more chickpeas than I do garden peas, the regular kind. I like to keep it interesting. Here we go. They actually taste pretty similar to regular garden peas, although when you get them from a store they taste totally different. It's kind of funny. So that's pretty much this garden in a nutshell. It's doing pretty well, I see. A little bit messy, but that's okay, because great for the pollinators. And it's also kind of a more natural way of growing things, I think. This grass clippings as mulch. I need to add another layer of grass clippings pretty soon because they're starting to decompose a little. Yeah, I think it's growing pretty nicely. It's been a bumper year for raspberries. You've been picking them and picking them. More come every day, but they're starting to slow down now. But we have a lot of raspberries in the freezer, which is great. Actually canned some of those raspberries the other day. Turned out pretty nicely. But we mostly freeze them for the most part. We're in this box over here. I got a single giant cabbage plant. And these things grow to be massive, like the size of me basically. And so there's other plants in this box, but cabbage is the main star. And we'll see how big it grows at the end of the season. But I think I'll be making sauerkraut with that one. So here's another box where I just moved another garden bed that was by the apple tree, because it was kind of in the way for mowing between the apple tree and the new vegetable garden. So I just moved all that soil down here, which mostly had poppies, but also planted a bunch of hollyhocks and mallows and that sort of thing. Gotta be very careful here because there's a wasp's nest down there. So we don't want to get too close. See the wasps flying in and out. But gotta hand it to those wasps. They've been doing an excellent job at keeping the pests off these kale plants. So these kales, I step very quietly around the wasp nest. They're basically untouched by the cabbage butterfly, and I think it's because those wasps have been seeing them just eating crawling around these kales and eating things off it, so it's great. It's been a pretty good garden. Mostly used this for kale, but had some garlic there. Might be a couple garlics left. Been using them in cooking before they were fully developed, just because they're so good and I needed garlic. So there's also a comfrey in here, which I've been chopping and dropping, and it keeps growing back. More comfrey to chop and drop, which uses mulch, which fertilizes soil, and hence why these kale plants are so big, doing so well. It's fireweed over here, that's all volunteer, and it's in full flower. Quite a bit of fireweed over here actually. And also has some broad beans planted here. So let's see. There's a broad bean, also known as fava beans, I think. Yeah, I got the seeds at CV Saturday, so I just planted them in here. They're a cool weather crop. But I had another one somewhere over here. So yeah, they've been doing pretty well over here. This is last year's victory garden. And so this year I kind of decided to let it go fallow because I just wanted to see kind of what grows here naturally. And to my surprise, there is a lot of St. John's wort growing here, which, if you don't know, is a common herb that's been used for hundreds of years for treating depression. So yeah, it's basically a herb that if you make a tea or a tincture, take it, it'll make you happy for a little while. And there are some contradictions with this herb. It can't be used with certain medications, so if you're planning to use it, just either talk to your doctor or just do your research, see if it's right for you, kind of thing. Planted mint here last year as a companion plant for, what was it? I think it was beets or Swiss chard or something. And it's kind of taken over now, which is great. It's actually flowering and it's growing really tall. And so it's actually turning out to be a pretty nice herb garden. St. John's wort and the mint. And I also planted, where is it? There's a lemon balm over here, which is doing okay. Haven't had much success with lemon balm around here. It might just not be right zone for it or something, or it's not. I'm just not planting it in the right spaces. But there's also some. What were these? I think these were rutabagas actually. Just scattered some rutabaga seeds in here just for fun. Yeah, there's more growing up front than there is at back, but that's okay. That is still a victory after all this time. And who can forget my plant sanctuary? Still got the sign, pardon our weeds, we're feeding bees. That's absolutely right. So it's grown pretty wild over the last couple of years. A whole bunch of alfalfa over here that I planted for my leafcutter bees, and they've been liking it. My leafcutter bees have been awake for probably about a month now. Kind of probably sleeping today, but the activity has slowed down quite a bit. Some of the cells are capped off now, so it means I'll probably have more leafcutter bees next year. My valerian, it's kind of taken over this spot, so I think I will harvest some roots this year just because it's more abundant and I'll have enough to actually have roots to use and to save for growing more plants in this spot. Over here I got some cannabis plants. Yeah, I'm growing it mainly for novelty, but I just think they're kind of an interesting plant. And if you don't know, I live in Canada, so I have my 4 legal allowed plants, so that should be totally fine. And some lupins over here that didn't flower yet, but they probably will next year. We'll see. Got a whole bunch of comfrey in the back that I recently chopped and dropped, and it's starting to grow back now, which is great. Hello, wasp. What you doing? It's a motherwort plant that I planted last year. It's come back, but it hasn't really grown very big, but it would just not be the ideal spot for it, I don't know. But there's lots of sporadic herbs in here. Got some wild strawberries actually, mixed with domestic strawberries in there. What else? There was, where did I see? There's some catnip growing over there. One of my few catnip plants that survived. I don't know what it is this year about catnip, but there are not really a lot of them around this year. My hops are doing great, and I noticed some of my hops are flowering. So these, I believe, are male hops flowers, which spread the pollen, pollinate the female cones. I don't have any cones yet, but if these are flowering, I'm sure these other ones should start to make cones if they're female plants, but they have a different kind of look to this one. This one's actually growing big and vigorous, and it's actually climbing to the top of the string, trying to climb on the roof, which is pretty cool. The other ones aren't that big, but that one's getting pretty close. That one's probably the smallest one out of all of them, but even if I don't get cones, I can always make tea with the leaves. It makes a great tea. Down here, did get quite a bit of sage coming back over here. More sage over there. And I planted a tarragon. That was tarragon over here. There's last year's wormwood, which is actually starting to flower, I think. Camera's not focusing well today. That's wormwood anyways. And a whole bunch of flowering oregano, I say oregano. Depending on where you live, you might say oregano or something similar, but it's a big patch of oregano. And we have to cut some of this back and just dehydrate it, and makes a good tea as well as used in cooking. Yeah, so that's how things are growing, in case you were wondering. Well, thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a long wait. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, happy growing, everybody.